Working Cows Podcast, episode 365. This episode is brought to you by Understanding Ag.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Hi, everybody. This is Clay Connery, host of the Working Cows Podcast, recorded exclusively in the Understanding Ag studios. And this episode is brought to you by Understanding Ag. We've been fortunate to feature some of the world's leading regenerative ag and adaptive grazing experts on our show. And many of those experts are farmer, rancher instructors from the nonprofit Soil Health Academy. This year, you'll have several opportunities to experience and profit from attending one of their remarkable on-farm schools and workshops. Whether you're interested in learning more about diversifying corn and bean rotations to increase profitability, merging multiple species in marketing, grazing on the high plains and in northern environments, regenerative farming and ranching, or enhancing profits and production in your beef or dairy operation, the Soil Health Academy has a school for you. One of the best investments you can make is in yourself. So visit soilhealthacademy.org to learn more and register. Financial assistance scholarships are available. Very excited to be joined today by Kristine Root of Regenify, and we're going to talk to her today about the progress that Regenify has been making in verifying regeneration of food systems. And so that's everything from field to fork, pasture to plate, whatever alliteration you want to use to illustrate that. That's the work that Regenify is doing. They're verifying the regeneration of all parts of that chain. And so it's an ambitious goal and an audacious goal, but it's one that they are well positioned to accomplish. So very excited to talk to Kristine about the progress they're making on that work today. Kristine, thanks for joining me today on the Working Cows Podcast.
Clay, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, it's always good to catch up on what's happening over at Regenify. Had the opportunity to talk to Doug and Salar on episode 341 of the Working Cows Podcast. That'll be linked in the show notes page for today. And we talked just a little bit about Regenify and what's going on over there. So kind of wanted to have you on today to get an update about what's going on there and some of the momentum that you guys are building there. So could you share with me a little bit of what's happened since December and kind of an overall view of what you guys are, the target you're aiming at there at Regenify?
Absolutely. Clay, thanks for asking. There's a lot going on right now. Regenerative is such an exciting space to be in. There's a lot of evolution, a lot of change, there's a lot of growth, there are a lot of questions. When we think about, kind of the momentum of where it's at from the farm level to all the way through the supply chain down to the retailers and the consumers, we're seeing growth in consumer awareness about what regenerative agriculture is moving pretty rapidly. And we're moving from a place where people were like, well, I generally understand what the concept is, to people saying, ooh, I think that actually checks off the boxes of what I'm looking for. So I don't yet think we're at a point where consumers are going to the shelf and saying, I know I'm here to buy a regenerative product. But they're definitely going to the shelf saying, I want to support companies who are doing the right thing, people who are, companies who are solving climate change. I want to support companies who are providing the most nutrient-dense food for my family. A lot of the things that regenerative solves is exactly what consumers are asking for right now.
Sure. And where do you think we are kind of in the grand scheme of things as far as demand and the ability to meet that demand? Would you say that there's more supply of regenerative products than there is demand for them, or is it kind of equal? Are they keeping up with each other?
I think we're in a toddler stage right now. I think there's a lot of learning to be had. There's a lot of question marks on both sides, and there's a growth happening on both sides, but there's a lot of also lack of transparency about what's happening on both sides. So on the farm level, farm practices, well, what does it really mean that a farmer is regenerative? How can I really tell that they're applying regenerative practices? On the brand side, well, what does it really mean to support regenerative practices and to be buying from a regenerative supply chain? And I think a lot of those questions that come up in this early stage make it hard to see the true transparency around the potential and the market potential. But the amount of folks that we're talking to in the farming community and the amount of folks that we're talking to in the brand community and the retail community are continuously growing. And there's increasing interest on both sides of the coin, allowing for some great matchmaking opportunities to happen.
Sure. And if I understand it right, that's kind of the space that Regenified exists in, is reaching that hand out in both directions and saying farmer, meet brand, meet people seeking regenerative products. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. I mean, Regenified's role is really to provide truth and transparency across the supply chain. It's to help move the industry forward and create recognition for the practices and the commitments that people are making to create measurable outcomes and progress towards regenerative agriculture. And we know that without farmers transitioning and adopting practices and creating impact on the ecosystems and the products they're growing, without brands saying, I want to support that and buy those products, without retailers saying, we want to get those products on shelf, and without consumers saying, we want to buy those products, if any one of those doesn't continue moving forward, it stalls the process. But what we're really working to do is create those bridges across all of those areas. And you really mentioned something that we're really focused on at the moment, is connecting that connection between the farm and the brand and the retailer, to make sure that those links are syncing forward while this demand is growing with consumers, so that that system of supply chain is working efficiently as the demand continues to grow.
Yeah, and would it be true that that when you connect a farmer to a brand, you open his products to a global audience in a lot of cases? And I think that's one of the limitations of direct-to-consumer models, is that we end up having way more, or producing more than the people that we're able to connect with directly are able to consume. And so if we had an outlet where all of those products could go, and they're certified regenerative by Regenified, but they go right to a brand, then basically the world becomes the consumer for those regenerative products. Is that part of what's happening there?
Yeah, absolutely. The more that we can match make those opportunities real time, keep things moving, build connection, and deepen those relationships so that it can expand. So that, I think what we see a lot of right now is our brands are completely blind to where their food comes from. We just earlier this week, actually on Monday, one of our farmers in Illinois and another brand in our network from California were able to connect with each other on a supply chain delivery of grain for a turkey operation. And so that grain coming out of Illinois, both farmers on each side of that equation were so excited. They got to meet out in the field in Illinois. The diesel turkey got to see what was happening on the farm where their corn was growing. They got to meet the farmer, learn about the practices. That farmer who's growing the corn got to see, where is this going to go? What are the values you hold as a company? And for both sides, there was a huge opening of transparency and understanding the full life cycle of what they're invested in, what they're supporting, and these shared values. And that relationship is priceless, but that deepens that opportunity. And I think what it takes away a lot of right now is that this is just an X ingredient that goes into Y. It now becomes personal. Now it's like, this is an investment in progress, that this is living up to our values, that working with this farmer, I'm understanding what's happening in their growing season. I'm understanding what's happening in their company. What does their business look like? And now I'm starting to think about, how can I be additive in that process, buying their grains? How can I be a value add to them while being a value add to my customer? And I think it just starts changing the emotional and physical and financial dynamics of that relationship in a significant way, where we now see exactly what you're saying, kind of that bigger worldwide connection, where it's not just one, it's not even just a one-to-one relationship, but there's now other opportunities. Well, hey, you have more. Can we connect you with another brand who's interested in the same things? So you're getting more market opportunity and expanding.
Yeah, and as I said earlier on episode 341, we talked to Doug and Solar, Doug being the chief science officer, Solar being the CEO. And what's your role in the company? I mean, you offer a unique perspective as somebody who kind of eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff all day, every day. What's your role in the company? What are you doing there at Regenified?
Yeah, quite literally. My role is Chief Marketing Officer. And so I'm really looking kind of at multiple different levels. I'm looking at understanding how do we communicate who Regenified is and what we're doing in the world and the opportunity that we're presenting to farmers, to brands throughout the supply chain, consumers. But I'm also looking at how do I tell the story of the folks who join in our network. So regenerative agriculture, we're not the hero in this story. The hero is all of the people who are making the commitments. We're just here to provide transparency, to create those opportunities and bring folks together who have like-minded values and are working towards similar shared goals. And so in my role in marketing, I have this opportunity to broker not just the buy-sell deals, but to broker the narratives with consumers and with retailers around what's happening and why is this so important. And I get a chance to highlight the folks that are in our community and tell their stories.
Sure. Do you have an understanding of, or do you have an understanding of how people are coming across this message, how people are coming in contact with this idea of regenerative agriculture? And we'll start maybe with the consumer side of it. What is it that is driving the demand on the consumer side for regenerative products or for products from companies that are making a commitment to be good stewards of what they've been entrusted with?
Yeah, Clay, I'm glad you narrowed it down and said, let's start with a group because there's a lot of pathways. That's the beauty of regenerative agriculture, and also the challenge for a lot of people in messaging and communicating it. But when we specifically look at consumers, we see an evolution over time. We see that consumers as a whole are getting to be more aware. I mean, I think if we step backward about 10 years, maybe even 15, in terms of the advancement of digital technologies and digital relationships with consumers started at that point starting to demand a relationship with customers. I mean, with brands. Mm-hmm. So the consumers are looking for a relationship. They're no longer happy with a one-way, like you just push something out to me, I see it on a TV or I hear it on a radio station. And so it really started with this two-way conversation that was happening in a digital platform between brands and their customers. And then customers started looking, as we fast forward, through the years, customers start saying, well, hey, if I can vocalize my interest to you guys, if this is a two-way conversation, and you want to understand who I am, well, let me tell you who I am. And so while this dichotomy of relationships between brands and consumers is evolving, at the same time, what we have happening is we have ongoing issues that have continued, issues with climate, issues with carbon, issues with water security. These issues have continued to degrade over time. And public awareness of some of these issues is growing and growing and growing. And so while we have, a relationship developing, this digital relationship, two-way conversation developing, and we have issues happening in the world that consumers are aware of, consumers are now starting to say, well, how can I use my dollar to support the people who care about the same things I care about? And make an investment in the kind of change that I want to invest in. So, and we also have transitioning demographics of buying power happening. So right now we're starting to see Gen Z come into more buying power than other groups, than some of our other groups in our purchasing, hierarchy of customer bases. And Gen Z in particular grew up in an era where they had this two-way relationship with brands. There's this dialogue and their expectations are higher, but they're also saying, we really, really care. We grew up in an era where we want to understand what's happening in the world, where are things going? And so what they're looking for is an opportunity to engage in that relationship and to use their dollar to vote with these companies who are making the kinds of values-based decisions and commitments that they're asking for. But we also see that growing with other audiences. We see Gen X audiences and Boomer audiences, all of these different groups. They're starting to think about, how does this impact me? And, all it takes, and we see this even in the farming community, is someone to have a major health crisis and to have their doctor say, you know what, this is something that could have been prevented without the exposure to chemicals.
Mm.
This is something that you can control through diet. This is something you have an opportunity to reverse and it points back in a lot of those cases to things that impact our ag system, that impacts our food system. And so that really unlocks opportunities. And I say that because it's not just Gen Z who's driving this movement. It's not just Gen Z who's making these requests and these demands. We see it happening and growing within all of our consumer segments who are saying, I want, and the pathways are hundreds. Like I said, it could be, a consumer saying, I'm really worried about the climate crisis right now, and I want something solved with that. It could be someone else saying, we've just had a baby, and I want my baby to have the healthiest life possible, and so we're going to eat the best high-quality, nutrient-dense food. There are hundreds of those pathways and regenerative agriculture is the solution on many of them.
Right. Yeah, and I mean it comes from everywhere, right? So before we jump into some questions about certification and some of those things, let's look at the other side of that coin. What about brands? Are the brands becoming aware of that just due to the demand? Is it a demand-driven thing for these brands, or are there other ways? And I suppose it's the same. It's myriad channels of demand or of things that are pushing them in this direction. But as far as the brands are concerned, what is driving their interest in this regenerative certification?
I think there are two things that come to mind right off the top of the bat for me. One of them is every brand owner is an eater. Every brand owner is a consumer. And so those brand owners are going through that same kind of journey we just saw consumers going through in terms of wanting to make investments in things that matter to them. And so they're making business-based decisions that align with those values. But then there's also market opportunity. Where is the potential for revenue and growth as a company? And they're reading the tea leaves in some ways. They're trying to project, they're business owners. They're trying to project, where is the opportunity for us? Where can we create differentiation in the marketplace? How can we stand out and communicate to customers? We see what customers are saying to us. We hear what they're asking for. How do we lean into that and take advantage of that as an opportunity for our success? How do we choose through our supply chain initiatives, through our purchasing power, to invest in the things people are asking for from us? And so they're really looking at market opportunity. They're looking at validation, differentiation on shelf. They have split seconds to capture a new consumer's attention. And they want something that helps people understand that they're going further, that they're doing more, that what they're doing matters. And that's really where the certification, that's where some of these pieces make those communications in a short period of time to help connect with consumers' desires and show transparency into something that's otherwise very complex to communicate.
Right. Yeah. The first occasion for my family was a bag of cocoa powder, had a regenerative label on it. And then just last night, actually, we were on our way home from town. Town days tend to be exhausting because we live 4 miles from our nearest neighbor, and we kind of like it that way. And we grabbed a couple of frozen pizzas at the gas station, the last one we passed before we came to our house, which is 70 miles from our house. Not all of them are 70 miles away, just that one was. But anyways, grabbed a couple of frozen pizzas, throw them in the oven when we get home. And as I'm sitting there reading the instructions on the back, there it is. X brand loves regenerative agriculture right on the back of the frozen pizza box. And so I see those, but then the cynic podcaster question asker in me wants to say, by what standard? By whose metric are we calling this regenerative? And so kind of talk to me about that, the danger. We see all these brands making commitments, but what's the balance of risk and opportunity in the absence of this regulatory definition? Talk to me a little bit about that.
I mean, that's exactly why Regenify exists. Because there's, when something is popular, when people are asking for something, when there's an interest in an area and there's a business opportunity for success, everyone's going to want to capitalize on it. But regenerative is too powerful of a thing. And there are farmers who are committed and working hard in their fields to do the right thing and to create positive impacts that benefit them, that benefit their farm, their ecosystem, their community, but they also benefit every single eater who's eating the products that they're growing. And that impact is so important. It's so significant, and it needs to be differentiated and it needs to be recognized. Another farmer who's saying, well, okay, I didn't till, isn't having the same impact. And a brand who's saying, well, we sourced, 2% of our ingredients from farms who were regenerative, or that's not the same as a company who's made a commitment to saying, we're going to make their business success part of our business success, because together we're going to meet the need of consumers. And so the risk of greenwashing is huge, but that's where certification can create that transparency. That is really about validating through verification practices the efforts that are happening on the farm and validating supply chain custody, chains of custody, to make sure that that specific grain, that specific corn is moving through the supply chain to the end consumer product transparently, so that what a consumer is actually buying is not theoretically investing in it, but is very practically investing in outcomes that are happening at the ground level with the farmers, and making sure that effort continues. Because I think for me, the biggest danger as we fast forward 10 years, if we allow greenwashing to move forward, I think we'll all look back and a lot of people will say, well, regenerative actually wasn't that impactful. It wasn't very powerful. And the truth is very far away from that. Our farms and what they're doing for the planet, what they're doing for rural communities, what they're doing for their families, and what they're doing for every single one of our eaters is critical. We need them, and we need them to get recognized and supported for the efforts that they're making.
Yeah, for sure. I think that a lot of the issues that have been created, both urban and rural, by the hollowing out of the rural communities, is in part, I think, regenerative agriculture helps reverse that, because there's more income, there's more margin. There's more margin on those acres, and you don't have to have one person farming 5,000 acres or one person grazing 10 to 20,000 acres just to make it support one family. It can support multiple families on the same number of acres, and then you open up that space for more people to return. And I think that in some senses, maybe what we're looking at, maybe this is outside the purview of this discussion, but maybe what we're looking at is a deindustrialization of the food system and moving more in the direction of having those opportunities for people to have their hands on what they're producing, and giving them the opportunity to find markets for those things. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, raising something in a regenerative way and releasing it to just the regular commodity markets is not giving you all of the benefits that you could have. And so these supply chains need to be in place so that people can reap the benefits of what they're producing.
Yeah, Clay, Gabe Brown will say that it's really a shift in mentality to profitability rather than yield. Right? When we can focus on profitability at the farm level, I hear from several farms that it wasn't possible for them before for their children to come back and work on the farm because there wasn't enough profitability to sustain, one family plus another family plus a third family. One family was all. So their daughter, their son couldn't come back and work the farm because they couldn't build that transition plan and sustain more than one family at a time.
Let's take a quick break and hear a word from our sponsor today, Understanding Ag. We've been fortunate to feature a number of Understanding Ag's regenerative farming and ranching experts on the podcast over the years. In that time, Understanding Ag's reputation for helping producers understand and successfully and profitably apply money-saving regenerative principles and practices has only grown. And there are two primary reasons for that. First, Understanding Ag's consultants are farmers and ranchers who've been there, done that on their own regenerative farms. And second, Understanding Ag's consultants aren't in the business to sell you costly inputs. They get no commissions and you get no pressure, just profit building solutions for your operation. Learn more at understandingag.com and discover the hope in healthy soil. That's www.understandingag.com. Is there more going on in this verification process than building trust with the consumer? I mean, obviously there is from in all aspects of the supply chain, but that seems to be a big part of it, right? We have to have trust with the end consumer that they know what we meant when we said regenerative, just like I'm asking the question of the back of the pizza box. What do you mean by that? They have to have confidence and trust that they know what that means, right?
Yep, absolutely. That's the base level. That is just the base level, is making sure that there's kind of a shared understanding of what is regenerative agriculture. And when someone says they're regenerative, what does that mean? When a brand says that they're sourcing from a regenerative farmer, what does that mean? And so there's education that goes with that. So there's the transparency, but then there's also an education layer. And on top of that education layer, there's also connecting the dots. I mean, I think the thing that gets really exciting for me is there's a real lack in understanding. I see this, I've worked with, education for quite a long period of time in the slow food movement with consumers. And I'm always amazed when you go into an elementary school classroom and kids have no idea where a tomato comes from. It comes from the grocery store if you ask them, right? But our supply chain as a whole isn't a lot different. A brand purchasing flour, for example, says the flour comes from the mill. Mm. If you ask them, they're not saying it came from Farmer Joe. They're saying it came from the mill. And so I think there's an opportunity. I mean, even if we just look at, chefs for a long period of time were this position in the back of the house in a kitchen that nobody paid attention to. And what happened when we could bring them to the front of the house, when we could highlight their stories and people understood, well, now these chefs had influences over what consumers eat. They became, mini celebrities in some cases who are guiding our understanding of culinary opportunities, of how to find joy through food. And I think we're at the point where that's what we need in farming. And regenerative agriculture and bringing transparency and bringing story to what's happening on the farm level, I think can break a lot of what's blind in our system. And it goes beyond just visibility. I mean, transparency, it goes into visibility. It brings people into an understanding of no two farming seasons are the same. That what's happening this year is different than last year, and that's going to influence what we grew and how we grew it and the practices that we used and how we got to a successful outcome, with our goal always being to maintain this amazing resource, restore vitality within what nature is giving us to get amazing food to consumers that tastes good, that's nourishing. But we all have to know that exists, that's the base of what we're getting. And I think that's the other real opportunity through regenerative agriculture, specifically when you look at certification, is the ability to start bringing those narratives and start creating those connections and deepen people's understanding of where food comes from, why, what it takes to get this food, and all the players that it takes to bring them to a consumer's plate.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. As Brian Alexander of the Ranching Reboot podcast would say, normal is just a setting on a dryer when it comes to what is a normal year. There is no such thing as a normal year.
I love that. I've never heard it.
But yeah, no, I that is very, very well said. I appreciate that. What are the challenges? I mean, what challenges are you facing on a day-to-day basis? What are you trying to overcome? What are you tackling? What are the issues you're dealing with?
I think clarity. I think, education. I think, there's a lot of interest, but like I said, at a toddler stage, and with that comes a lot of toddler knowledge base. And so a lack of understanding of what regenerative agriculture is, even a lack of definition, as you alluded to earlier, is challenging because, different people are trying to define differently. And some people have different intentions in how they're trying to define regenerative agriculture. And that presents a challenge or a risk. I think there's also, just also the excitement and the interest is also a challenge, because it's responding to that interest, and it's providing the right level of education and awareness, and kind of, our role is as a certifier, providing certification throughout that supply chain. But it's also, we have a responsibility to be educators, to provide knowledge, to be generous with the information that exists out there, so that other people can all be lifted up, so that everyone has a place to enter into regenerative agriculture, because that's the kind of impact that's really important. It's not one person or a couple people doing it. We're at a point where farming really needs an opportunity for prosperity, where instead of dwindling farms across the countryside, it would be amazing to see expanding farm opportunities. Like you mentioned earlier, rural communities are fading. It would be amazing to see a restoration, rebuilding of those rural communities. And that's not going to happen with one or two farms. This is going to happen with creating opportunities and creating those connections at scale. So how do we provide enough information, enough education, and a welcome mat for everybody who wants to learn, for everybody who wants to move forward and find opportunity through regenerative agriculture? And that's exciting, but it's also challenging. And that's the work that, as the Chief Marketing Officer at Regenify, I'm consistently looking at where and how can we share more information? Where do we need to be to show up for people when they're asking questions? And so being here with you today is an amazing gift to be able to share and answer questions that you have and provide information for your community.
Well, and I think that, that you mentioned the disconnect, right? In the whole supply chain, the flour, the people purchasing the flour thinks it comes from the mill. The people purchasing the tomato think it comes from the grocery store. We've heard that story, and it's true. But even more so, I would say that oftentimes the people drafting regulations in Washington, D.C., and even in state houses are as disconnected or more disconnected from these things than even the other people that are members of the supply chain. And so this Regenify represents to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Regenerative represents to me a free market response to that, or not even a response to that, the free market getting out in front of a government regulation or a government definition and saying, no, here we are, here's what it is, this is by farmers, for the food supply chain. This is the definition, and these are the results that it produces, and this is the process of becoming certified. So do you agree with that this is a free market response rather than waiting for government to come along and say, no, this is what it is?
Absolutely. We can't afford for family farms to fail before government responds. Government moves slow oftentimes. It's complex. There's complex systems in place. Absolutely, this is an opportunity to say, hey, well, that's working. Contact your local representatives, get active, provide education, share your input, but we can't wait. Farms need a lifeline. Consumers are asking for this. Brands have an opportunity to invest in this. It's here. It's right now. It's not once it gets through multiple houses and different committees and groups. It's here right now. And by just creating that opportunity, getting those different folks on both ends of the spectrum, from the farmer to the brand, connected, the change can happen. Grassroots, free market opportunity, because the interest is there and people want to change because people want opportunities.
That's my favorite thing about government, is that it moves slow, because then it does bad things slowly. So, no, I'm just...
Well, there's an upside in everything, isn't there?
Anyways, I don't... I want to move on and say, or ask you this question. What drew you to this? What drew you to this work? Why does it matter to you? Why is it important to you?
I've been working in marketing for 22, 23 years now. When I started my career, I learned to do amazing things. And it was a great gift to build my skill set. But I was in my early 20s, mid 20s, when I started thinking, I really want to use the skills that I have to do something meaningful. And so I spent, maybe 10 years saying, well, what can I do that's meaningful? And I did a bunch of different things that were very meaningful. But about 15 years ago, for me personally, I had this epiphany that food was the most powerful thing, that it had the opportunity. Good food could change the world. Not just one person, not just some people, but it could change it for all of us. It could change it on a human level. It can change it on a health level. It can change it on a planetary level. It can build communities. It can build connection. And so 15 years ago, I made a commitment to dedicate my career to growing good food. I mean, I'm a marketer. I'm a strategist. My job and what my skill set is to help people tell their story, to find growth opportunities, to help profitability and growth for companies. And so I decided to use that specifically dedicated to food. And when I met Salar and when I met Gabe and the team at Regenify, I said, this is it. Like, this is that one little piece that I always felt like was missing, that good food had to be expensive, that it had to be inaccessible or only for a select few, that it didn't across the board create opportunity for everybody. But when you put regenerative agriculture into the mix, it becomes a benefit. It becomes additive for everybody. It's not extractive from anybody across any layer of it. That's not how regenerative works, not true regeneration. And so I fell in 100%. This is what I was dedicated to doing, and it took me a few years to find it. But that's why I'm here, because I believe it has the power to change the world. But it starts with our farmers. It moves through recognition, and it takes consumers who are going to support this effort.
I think that's powerful, because when we recognize how we're wired or how God has gifted us, then we find out something that we're passionate about. Sometimes the temptation is to say, I'm going to go, like in your case, you could have said, I'm going to quit my job, plant a garden, and sit at the farmer's market every Saturday. But would that have moved the ball forward as far as just saying, no, I'm gifted in marketing, I'm gifted in strategy, I'm going to use those gifts to help move the ball of regenerative agriculture forward in strategy, and I think that's a powerful thing to think about, is not just what can I do right now, but how am I uniquely wired to help accomplish this goal of the need that I see in the world. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. We all have amazing gifts within us. We have these talents, these abilities, and it takes all of these different talents and abilities to be able to move something forward on a global level, to be able to change lives. And so we all have to be looking for our gift and our skill. We have to be saying, how can we embrace what we're really good at? And sometimes those things that we're really good at, we might look at, we might be like, that's not really a valuable skill. Like, how is my ability to, drive revenue? How is that going to help change the world? that seems like that's going to line corporate pockets. But the reality is it can. It's just knowing how and where and understanding your values and finding that place. But that's why we need everybody. That's why I'm super excited for more and more people to learn about regenerative agriculture, because this is not an issue that farmers are tackling. This is an issue that all of us should be standing behind farmers in.
Right. Yep. My parents would definitely echo your sentiments, because they sat through, or at least my dad did. My mom was a teacher, so she had her own parent-teacher conferences to go to, but my dad sat through my parent-teacher conferences, and it was a broken record for as long as I can remember. Clay likes to walk around, Clay likes to talk, Clay likes to distract other students. Well, I just happened to find myself a niche where talking and asking questions is what I am here to do. And so
fantastic.
But that is, you just have to find what you are, how are you wired, and use it for the good of your neighbors. Right. And that's what you're doing. I think that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm trying to do anyways. And so I think that's, as I said, an important piece for people to recognize. I don't have to go out and I don't have to become Gabe Brown to contribute to agriculture. I need to figure out what I'm wired to do and do that and contribute to moving this ball forward with regenerative agriculture. So
There's a place for all of us.
Yep.
Absolutely. And not just a place, we're all needed.
Mm-hmm. Yep, for sure. Well, and right down to the eater, as you've said, Gabe and Alan and I talked last time about, eating is an agricultural act, and eating is a spiritual act, as we would say, or as we all agreed, that we're here to steward the creation God has entrusted to us. And so we are doing that by making decisions with where we get our food. And the more the more opportunity expands, then the more that we have the ability to align those buying decisions with how we feel is best. Like we want to buy products that are raised regeneratively. Well, it's hard to do that right now, but that's the work that Regenify is doing, is opening up those supply chains and finding people who are producing that food, connecting them with brands who want to process that food and market that food to the broader audience. And so the more that gains traction, the more that we can do that. And so we talked earlier about the challenges that you guys face. What wins has Regenify experienced? What have been some of the successes that Regenify has been experiencing?
I think I mentioned earlier this week we were able to connect, two farmers, a poultry farmer and a grain farmer, and seeing the impact that it meant for them personally. Right, being able to break down barriers, to be able to get grains that were grown, segregated, moved across the country to a producer who desperately wanted and valued what that farmer was doing. Those are the moments of the wins. It's seeing that story told and seeing how excited that railway was to be able to be a part of that experience, a part of that moment. I mean, it's the human element behind all of this. There is so much opportunity. I mean, I think one of the areas that we're incredibly poor as a country is in community. It's in connection. And regenerative agriculture has an opportunity to build and bring communities together, to connect people. We had a farmer panel in January for our team, bringing different farmers to a panel to talk with our team about some of their experience and what they thought and what they were looking for. And those farmers at the end of the call were like, it was so fun to connect with the other farmers in the call and hear their stories and the conversations that have come between them and the connections that they now have with each other. Because a lot of times what we're finding is farmers who are farming regeneratively are like maybe the weird one in their community. They might be the odd duck who is kind of out there and no one at the coffee shop really wants to talk to them because they didn't till. What are they thinking? They've got weeds growing. That is going to impact my profitability. Like there's all these stigmas and all these things going on. But when folks who have these like-minded values, whether it's buyer and seller, whether it's two farmers, the more they can connect with each other and share stories and share experiences and share growth lessons with each other, the more they can catapult and move forward faster. The more success that they can achieve faster, and the more they can recognize that they're not alone. I mean, honestly, Clay, that's the most rewarding piece for me every day is that I made this commitment to good food 15 years ago. I didn't know about regenerative agriculture. But when I joined the team at Regenify, I am in a community and surrounded by a community of people who share these values every day, who are sharing knowledge with each other. And you can't even imagine how empowering that is. The opportunity and just having that connection is unbelievable.
Yeah, and it's been a long time since Texas wasn't the highest downloading state of the Working Cows podcast, like probably more than 5 years. And I'll never forget being at a table with a bunch of guys from Texas and saying that Texas is the state where most people download the podcast from, and all of them said, "Really, I don't know anybody in my neighborhood that thinks like I do. I have to come to deals like this." And we were in Sheridan, Wyoming, north central Wyoming. And, having this conversation. So they said, I have to come to deals like this far from my house to meet other people from my state who think like me. So this can be a very lonely thing, but that community is, just think about this. You drive from your house or from your work to your house, pull into your garage, shut the door, walk into your house. And if you're lucky, you go out into your backyard that has a privacy fence, right? There's no more front porch. There's no more waving at the neighbors as they drive by, so that community isolation is everywhere, not just in agricultural communities where you might be the weird one for sure. Or as I saw earlier this week, the village idiot, right? We're the only one doing this in your neighborhood. And so it's lonely there, but it's lonely everywhere. And so food is one of those powerful things that connects us. There's this culture, and I think it's wired into us of gathering together around food at special times and eating. And so Regenified is playing that important role of providing that certification process for all parties and the supply chain to make sure that people know where they can go and where they can get it. So, appreciate that. Appreciate the work that you guys are doing. What's next? What's on the horizon? What's in the future for you at Regenified?
Ooh, I mean, there's so much in motion right now. There are so many pieces coming. We released this year nutrient density testing, which is just a whole new layer on helping, really the end consumer understand what's in it for me. It's one thing, especially when times get tight or when finances go down in our economy, everyone has to self-preserve. And so making sure that we're really getting to the granular level that everybody understands this isn't just to support somebody else. It's not a do-good act, but it is truly in service to all of us. And so each time we make this commitment, each time we support a regenerative farmer, it is in service to us and something greater than us. And so that nutrient density is a place that is a very powerful space to help consumers understand that the practices that farmers are having and the outcomes that they're creating on their land translate down into a very direct, tangible result for them as an eater, that they're getting healthier food, that there's more nutrients in there. I mean, this gets into, the potential for solving the human health crisis and farmers' role in that. It's just so exciting. But that's if we were going to pick one hot up next, that's something that you're going to really see explode within regenerative and Regenified specifically.
What's the mechanism for that, the nutrient density testing?
So all of the certified farms in Regenified's network get access to nutrient density testing. That's lab testing that's testing for macro and micronutrients across across the harvested product to say, where does it benchmark against conventional? Where does it benchmark against organic? Where does it benchmark against grass-fed? There are a bunch of benchmarks that we're looking at with an individual product. And then we're looking at what is the quantifiable increase that we can see that then over time we can translate back to practices and outcomes in the field.
Wow. And at some point in the future, there would be, some connection to the food label that says this is the nutrient density. Is that kind of the vision of where that ultimately lands?
Yeah. If you look at our food labels right now, they don't really help you understand how healthy one product is against the next. I mean, you pick up 2 gallons of milk and they're going to say basically the same thing. They paint a very small picture of the nutrients within that packaging. And we're really excited to see that expand. So actually helping consumers understand that what's in one bottle isn't the same as what's in another bottle necessarily. That whole process from the farm to the shelf impacts that. And so absolutely, you're teasing on something that is in the works right now, but how do we get clear labeling that show consumers the difference in the impact?
Very good. Very good. Well, if people want to find out more, Kristine, where should we send them?
Visit us at regenify.com, www.regenify.com. That's our website. We have some information about our regenerative certification. We have our standards published on the website, so you can download them, take a read if you're interested in learning more about what we're looking for when we're doing our certification. And then if you have questions, reach out. We have contact forms. Our phone number is on the website. We love talking to people. We love hearing where people are at and what they're looking for, what their questions are, where they're curious. That helps us understand what information we need to provide, what information we can create, and knowledge we can share.
Sure.
So reach out.
Sounds good. Very good. And we're talking to an audience of farmers and ranchers here today. So the process for them, could you just give us a real high-level overview of that process? We talked mostly about this in the previous episode, but just kind of...
do a quick little recap here. So what happens when, as a farmer or rancher, if you're interested in certification, I would say hop on our website, give a read through what we're looking for. Take a look at our standards, download them if you're interested in reading those. And then if this sounds like something that you're really interested in, reach out. We have a Get Certified button right on the homepage of our website. It's right, on the above the fold. So first thing you're going to see on the page, click that button, and there's a tab in there for farmers. It's the first tab you're going to see. So fill that in and let us know what you're growing. Tell us what you've got. You'll hear from someone from our team who's going to reach out and set up a conversation with you to learn a little bit more about your business. And they'll walk you through end to end what certification looks like. So there's a process of getting to know you. There's a process of getting to understand what your business looks like. And then there's from there, we can put together scoping. What would verification look like for your farm? And then there's a verification visit from our team. Then there's the certificate award once a farm has been verified and reaches the tier status within our certification. And then a farmer joins the network. So that process can take, a couple of months. It can take 8 months. It's really how quickly farms want to move through it and how quickly we have the ability to get out for verification.
Very good. Kristine, thanks for your time today.
It was great to join you. I loved it.
Very good stuff there with Kristine. As always, folks at Regenify and understanding ag and people in that orbit, very qualified and well-spoken and able to communicate the passion that they have for these subjects and these projects that they're working on. So really enjoyed that conversation. Looking forward to next week with James Kaufelt. And James is a guy who is what I see as the epitome of the concessionizing versus capitalizing conversation. And he's more on the concessionizing side of it. So he is using every acre of land and water on his place, above ground, below ground, all over, to try to have as many income streams as possible. And so we're going to talk to him about all the things they have going on there, coming your way real soon on another episode of the Working Cows Podcast. We'll see you then.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.